Fern Wilder had 3 rules for a peaceful life. 1. Never get involved in pack politics. 2. Always sterilize your equipment. And 3. Under no circumstances should you let a dog the size of a small grizzly bear emotionally blackmail you into a relationship with an alpha king. As of this morning, she was failing spectacularly at Rule 3, which was putting Rule 1 in serious jeopardy. Her wolf, a creature roughly the spiritual equivalent of an anxious field mouse, had opinions about this. Reason number 1, we should close the clinic and move to a remote island. That animal weighs more than us. Reason number 2, his owner could crush a car door with his bare hands. Reason number 3, Fern told her wolf to be quiet. Her wolf did not, in fact, be quiet. Her wolf was never quiet. Her wolf had the volume of a megaphone and the courage of a damp napkin. It all started with a thorn. A single, stupid, insignificant thorn lodged in the paw of a dog so large his name, Brutus, felt less like a name and more like a statement of fact. The dog was a Tibetan Mastiff, the size of a small sofa and roughly twice as stubborn. He belonged to King Marcus Wolfheart, a man whose reputation was all sharp angles and quiet authority. That was the thing about Marcus that nobody at court would say out loud, but everybody whispered about. The Alpha King, the most feared wolf shifter on the continent, a man who could command legions with a glance, kept a pet dog. Not a bonded wolf, not a war beast. A dog. An enormous, drooling, emotionally manipulative pet dog who had been with him since it was a squirming, oversized puppy. The Elder Council found it eccentric. His enemies found it confusing. Brutus found it irrelevant. He knew exactly who ran the relationship, and it wasn't the man with the crown. Fern had treated him with the same professional detachment she used for Mrs. Higgins's yappy Pomeranian, which is to say, politely, efficiently, and with a deep internal hope that neither of them would drool on her. She'd removed the thorn, applied a salve, and accepted the king's formal, slightly stiff gratitude. And then Brutus, the king's most loyal companion, had lain down by her clinic door and refused to move. For 3 weeks. Her wolf had spent the first week in a state of rolling panic. He's still here. The enormous, hairy mountain is still here. We are being occupied. This is an occupation, Fern. Should we surrender? What do wolves surrender? Belly? We're not showing belly. We have dignity. Limited, small breed dignity, but it exists. Fern's wolf was small. That was just the truth of it. In a world of shifters whose inner wolves were all fangs and dominance and snarling territorial claims, hers was the runt of the spiritual litter. Too small to matter in pack hierarchy, too sensitive to handle the posturing, the chest puffing, the growling, the constant exhausting performance of strength. It was why she'd chosen veterinary work over pack life. She'd always felt more kinship with the injured sparrow on her table than with the alphas jockeying for dominance at the monthly pack gatherings. Animals didn't care about rank, they just needed help. Her wolf understood that, even if her wolf also spent most of its time narrating catastrophe scenarios. Now her life was a sitcom she hadn't auditioned for. The most powerful shifter on the continent was a daily fixture in her small, cat-scented veterinary clinic, trying and failing to coax his enormous dog to leave. His presence was a constant, low-grade disruption, like a car alarm you can't quite locate. He'd sit awkwardly on the single chair not covered in fur, nursing a cup of her terrible break-room coffee, while his legendary Tibetan Mastiff sighed dramatically and rested his massive head on Fern's foot. "He's touching our foot again," her wolf reported, as if filing an incident. "This is reason number 47 we should have become a marine biologist. Nothing this large lives in tide pools." They were trapped in a stalemate orchestrated by a 4-legged mastermind, and Fern was starting to suspect that the thorn hadn't been the problem. It had been the opening move. The bell on the clinic door chimed, announcing the king's daily pilgrimage of defeat. Marcus Wolfheart stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of pine forests and ozone, a smell so potent it momentarily drowned out the ambient aroma of antiseptic and worried pets. Fern's wolf immediately went rigid. Alpha, big alpha, enormous alpha. Technically, we could fit inside his shadow, hide, blend in with the floor tiles, be casual. It had been like this from the beginning. Every time Marcus walked in, her small Omega wolf tried to flatten itself into nothing, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of his presence. He wasn't trying to be intimidating, Fern knew that. But an Alpha King's energy filled a room the way a thunderstorm filled a sky, and her little wolf was the kind of creature that hid under porch furniture when it rained. He was dressed, as always, in dark, impeccably tailored clothes that made him look less like he was visiting a vet and more like he was about to annex a neighboring territory. His dark hair was perfect, his jaw was set, and his eyes, the color of storm clouds, immediately found Brutus, who was currently taking up the entire welcome mat. "Brutus," Marcus said, his voice a low command that usually made trained warriors flinch. Brutus lifted his head, gave a soft woof that sounded suspiciously like a sigh of contentment, and then placed his head back down, pointedly facing away from his master. A muscle twitched in the king's jaw. Fern, who was trying to update a chart for a chameleon with a vitamin deficiency, didn't look up. "Morning, Your Majesty. He's been quiet today, mostly just judged a poodle in for a nail trim. I think he found its haircut frivolous." Marcus ignored her, striding over to his dog. He crouched, his expensive trousers straining. "Brutus, we are leaving. Now." He put a hand on Brutus's collar. The great dog didn't resist. He simply became an immovable object, a furry mountain of passive resistance. He let out a long, mournful groan that echoed in the small room. A calico cat in a recovery cage hissed in solidarity. "Even the cat agrees this is unreasonable," her wolf observed. "Reason number 51, we are losing control of our own clinic." "He's never done this," Marcus said, for what felt like the 100th time. He straightened up, running a hand through his perfect hair and messing it up for the first time. It was a small crack in the royal facade, her wolf noticed. "Oh, his hair is messy now. That's less terrifying, actually. He looks almost normal." "Don't think about it. Focus on the chameleon. Chameleons are safe. Chameleons don't have jawlines." "He's my shadow. He follows every command." "Well," Fern said, finally turning in her squeaky chair, "maybe he's decided to unionize, demanding better benefits, more squirrels to chase, perhaps?" Marcus shot her a look that was probably meant to be intimidating, but was undercut by the sheer absurdity of the situation. "This isn't amusing, Dr. Wilder." "Isn't it?" Fern leaned back, tapping her pen against her chin. "From where I'm sitting, it's hilarious. You're the Alpha King. Your voice can halt armies, but this 180-pound ball of fluff has decided your authority is merely a suggestion." Brutus chose that moment to roll onto his back, exposing his belly and wagging his tail. He wasn't looking at Marcus, he was looking at Fern. "He wants us to touch him again," her wolf observed. "His belly is exposed. Technically, that's a vulnerability display. He trusts us. That's actually kind of sweet." "No. No, do not be charmed by the occupation force." With a long-suffering sigh, she got up and knelt beside him, scratching the spot right above his tail that made his leg thump against the floor. "See, he's perfectly happy." She'd noticed something over the past 3 weeks, though she hadn't told Marcus. Every agitated animal that came through her clinic doors calmed faster when she was near. The trembling dogs settled. The hissing cats went quiet. Even the ferret that bit everyone let her handle him without fuss. It was her wolf, her small, sensitive, anxious wolf, radiating a frequency that said, safe, calm, no threat here. An Omega's gift. Useless in a dominance fight, but in a room full of scared creatures, it was the most powerful thing in the world. She suspected it was why Brutus had chosen her floor in the first place. Not because of the thorn. Because her presence was a balm for something even a dog the size of a Tibetan Mastiff could feel. Marcus's gaze was fixed on her hand as she scratched his dog. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of frustration and something else, something deeper. Inside his head, his wolf was pacing in restless circles. "She's close. She smells like sunshine and chamomile. Why are we talking? Just sniff her hair. Be cool." Marcus fought the urge. Being king meant maintaining a constant, ironclad grip on his baser instincts. For the past 3 weeks, that grip had been slipping. Not because of some fated pull or destined bond. His wolf simply liked her. It liked that she didn't bow, didn't scrape, didn't flinch. It liked the calm she carried with her, the way the air around her felt like a clearing in a forest, quiet and still and safe. It liked her, the way you like a fire after a long, cold walk. Marcus cleared his throat. Perhaps if you were to command him to leave with me? Fern stopped scratching. Brutus let out a protesting whine. You want me to order your dog to go home? He seems to have transferred his allegiance to you, Marcus said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. It is unorthodox. Unorthodox is one word for it, Fern muttered. She looked down at the massive dog. All right, big guy, listen up. Your dad is here. It's time to go home. Go on, get! She gave his hindquarters a gentle nudge. Brutus responded by licking her hand, then rolling over and planting himself even more firmly on the floor, a furry doorstop of defiance. He then turned his head and gave Marcus a look. It was a look of pure, unadulterated smugness. Fern saw it, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of suspicion. This wasn't disobedience. This was a plan. Her wolf, for once, agreed. He's scheming. That face is the face of a creature with a plan. Reason number 62, we should be concerned. We are being strategically outmaneuvered by something that eats shoes. This is humiliating on a species level. You know, Fern said, standing up and dusting her hands on her scrubs, I don't think he's sick, and I don't think he's transferred his allegiance. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Then what, in your professional opinion, is this? Fern crossed her arms, a slow smile spreading across her face. This is a scheme. Your dog is a manipulative genius, and we are his pawns. Marcus stared at her as if she'd just suggested Brutus could do calculus. He's a dog, Doctor. His voice was flat, laced with the kind of weary patience one uses on a particularly dense child. Internally, his wolf was having a fit. She's smart. She figured it out. The furry idiot is a genius. Now get closer to her. Stop talking about strategy. You're terrible at this. Marcus firmly ignored his wolf. Is he? Fern countered, walking around the furry obstacle on the floor. Let's review the evidence. He only stages this protest when you're not here. The moment you arrive, he becomes the most pathetic, abandoned creature in the world. He positions himself strategically between us, forcing you to step into my personal space to address him. He sighs with contentment when we're both near him. Her wolf was following the logic with increasing alarm. Wait. Is she saying what I think she's saying? Reason number 63. The dog is trying to set us up? With the Alpha King? We are a small wolf, Fern. Small. We do not date mountains. He even lets out a low, almost imperceptible growl when my next appointment arrives, Fern continued, warming to her theory, as if he's annoyed they're interrupting. She stopped in front of Marcus, who was watching her with a dawning sense of horror. He's not staging a protest against you leaving. He's staging a protest until we get together. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the hum of the small refrigerator where she kept vaccines. Marcus looked from Fern's earnest, slightly unhinged face to Brutus, who had chosen this exact moment to look as innocent as a creature of his size possibly could. He blinked his big brown eyes slowly, as if the conversation was far too complex for his simple canine brain. That's the most absurd thing I have ever heard, Marcus said. But his voice lacked conviction. His own wolf was practically howling in agreement. The smart female understands. The furry idiot is wise. Now get closer. Is it? Fern's eyes gleamed with the thrill of a puzzle solved. Let's test it. A little experiment. For science. Science? Her wolf yelped. We are not a science experiment. We are a small, cautious wolf who does not volunteer for... Before Marcus could protest, she grabbed his hand. A jolt went up Fern's arm, warm and unexpected, like touching a sun-baked stone. She saw Marcus's eyes widen for a split second before his composure reassembled. He didn't pull away. His hand was warm and large, calloused from work she couldn't imagine a king doing. Her wolf went absolutely haywire. "We are holding the king's hand. This is not a drill." Reason number 64, his hand is enormous. Reason number 65, it's warm. Reason number 66, why is it warm? Reason number 67, we kind of don't hate this? Retract that. Retract immediately. She ignored the frantic thumping of her own heart and towed him over to the worn-out love seat in the corner of the waiting area. "Sit," she commanded, not him, but the situation. He sat. She sat down next to him, their thighs brushing. The space suddenly felt very small. "Now," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the dog. "We watch." For a long moment, Brutus didn't move. He just lay there, his great head on his paws. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. He looked at them, sitting together on the love seat. His tail gave a single, tentative thump against the linoleum. Then another. "He's thumping," her wolf narrated unnecessarily. "The tail is thumping. This is either approval or a seizure. I'm hoping seizure." Brutus let out a soft woof of pure satisfaction. And then, with the unhurried grace of a creature who had just successfully executed a multi-week psychological operation, he stood up. He stretched, a long, luxurious movement that rippled through his massive frame. He padded silently across the floor, not to them, but to the front door. He sat down facing it, looked back over his shoulder at the two of them, and barked once. A sharp, clear sound that said, "There, was that so hard? My work here is done. Let's go." Marcus stared, utterly speechless. His mind, trained in strategy and statecraft, reeled. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and thoroughly checkmated. By his own dog. Fern burst out laughing. It wasn't a small, polite chuckle. It was a full, unrestrained peal of laughter that filled the clinic. She laughed until tears pricked her eyes, laughed at the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of it all. Her wolf, despite itself, was laughing too. Okay, fine. That was magnificent. Diabolical, but magnificent. We have been outplayed by a dog. A dog. We are wolves, Fern. Wolves. And a dog just ran circles around us. But that was objectively hilarious. "He's a matchmaker," she gasped, wiping a tear from her eye. A furry, four-legged, ridiculously oversized matchmaker. Marcus finally found his voice. It was rough. He has some explaining to do. But he wasn't looking at Brutus. He was looking at Fern, at the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, at the flush on her cheeks. His wolf, for the first time in 3 weeks, was quiet. Not demanding or restless, just content. It let out a low, rumbling vibration deep in his chest, a sound of pure satisfaction. His wolf didn't understand destiny. It didn't care about fate. It just knew what it liked, and it liked her. The way a wolf likes a warm den, a fresh trail, the first snow. Not because it was told to, because it chose to. He realized, with a startling clarity that had nothing to do with strategy, that he wasn't annoyed at all. He felt relieved. The stalemate was over, but the game, he suspected, was just beginning. The following Monday, the bell on Fern's clinic door chimed at precisely 9 a.m. She looked up from her desk, expecting a client with a sick lizard or a nervous hamster. Instead, King Marcus Wolfheart stood there, holding a cardboard tray with 2 steaming cups of coffee. He was alone. There was no giant, manipulative Tibetan Mastiff in sight. Her wolf peeked out cautiously. He's back, without the furry one. Reason number 68, a predator returning without his usual companion is either courting or hunting. We should determine which before accepting beverages. Good morning, Dr. Wilder, Marcus said, his voice smoother than it had been in weeks. He gestured with the coffee. I thought you might appreciate something that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a sock. Fern raised an eyebrow, a slow smile playing on her lips. To what do I owe the honor, Your Majesty? Has Brutus decided my floor is no longer up to his high standards for napping? Brutus is at the palace, Marcus said, stepping inside. He placed one of the cups on her cluttered desk. It smelled heavenly, rich and dark, with a hint of cinnamon. He is currently being spoiled by the kitchen staff. I believe he thinks he's earned it. He took a sip from his own cup, his eyes never leaving hers. The casual confidence was new. The frustrated, flustered king of the past 3 weeks was gone, replaced by the alpha king she'd only ever heard about. But there was a warmth in his gaze now, a hint of humor that hadn't been there before. I see, Fern said, leaning back in her chair. She took a sip of the coffee. It was, in fact, divine. So you're not here to retrieve your dog? No, Marcus said simply. I'm here to see you. Her wolf did a full-body freeze. He's here to see us, just us, no dog buffer, no pretense. Reason number 69, this is a courtship approach. Reason number 70, we are wearing scrubs with a coffee stain on the left elbow. Reason number 71, our hair looks like a bird tried to nest in it. This is not the time, Fern. The bluntness of it caught her off guard. Her heart did a little flip-flop that she chose to attribute to the excellent coffee. Is that so? She managed, her voice impressively steady. And why is that? He leaned against the edge of her desk, a move that was both casual and commanding. Because, Dr. Wilder, it has come to my attention that I have been neglecting a matter of great importance. A matter my wisest advisor, he said, a wry twist to his lips, saw fit to repeatedly and unsubtly bring to my attention. Your wisest advisor is currently drooling on a royal chef, I presume? Precisely. He made it very clear that my presence was required here, with or without him. The air between them shifted. The playful absurdity of the Brutus situation had evaporated, leaving behind a tangible, humming tension. This wasn't about a dog anymore. This was about him and her. Marcus's wolf was a calm sea now, a stark contrast to the hurricane it had been. It recognized something it wanted, not out of obligation, not because the moon told it to, but because every instinct it had pointed at this woman and said, her. She's the one who makes us better. He was a king. He negotiated treaties, commanded armies, and held the fate of his people in his hands. But asking a woman on a date felt more terrifying than facing down a rogue alpha. I was wondering, he began, his voice a fraction lower, if you might be available for dinner this evening. Fern's brain short-circuited. Her wolf was no better. Dinner. With the king. A proper, intentional, non-dog-related social event. Reason number 72? We don't own clothes that aren't covered in pet hair. Reason number 73. What if we use the wrong fork? Do kings have special forks? Reason number 74. We kind of really want to say yes, and that's the most terrifying reason of all. She thought of her plans for the evening, which involved microwave popcorn and rewatching a documentary on reptilian hibernation. She started, but was interrupted by the frantic ringing of the clinic's phone. She shot it a venomous look. Wilder Veterinary Clinic, Fern speaking. It was her best friend Lena, who ran the mystical herb shop next door. Lena's voice was a conspiratorial hiss. Okay, don't panic, but the king is in your clinic, and he doesn't have the giant dog, and Lady Margot Procius just stepped out of a carriage across the street. She's carrying a leather folio, and she looks like she's about to audit someone's happiness. What did you do? Fern's blood ran cold. Lady Margot Procius, the kingdom's master of royal protocol. The woman whose entire purpose in life was to manage the crown's public image with the ruthless efficiency of a military campaign. She decided who sat where at state dinners, who was photographed beside the king, and which relationships were strategically appropriate. She had been grooming the king's public image since before Marcus took the throne, and she treated any deviation from her carefully constructed narrative as a personal affront. "He asked me to dinner," Fern whispered into the phone, her eyes wide as she stared at Marcus, who was politely pretending not to listen. "Oh, honey," Lena breathed. "You didn't just get involved in pack politics. You cannonballed into the deep end. Wear something stain-resistant." Lena hung up. Fern slowly placed the receiver back in its cradle. She looked at Marcus, whose expression had tightened. He had obviously heard. The clinic door didn't burst open. That wasn't Margot's style. It opened smoothly, precisely, as if even the door knew better than to misbehave in her presence. Lady Margot Proteus stepped inside. She was a tall, angular woman in her early 50s, dressed in charcoal silk with a silver brooch at her throat shaped like the royal crest. Her steel-gray hair was pulled into a knot so tight it could have been used as a weapon. She carried herself the way buildings carry cornerstones, as if the entire structure would collapse without her. She surveyed the clinic with the expression of a woman cataloging every violation. The fur on the chairs, the slightly crooked certificate on the wall, the faint smell of iguana. Fern's wolf whimpered and tried to become very, very small. Big energy. Cold, big energy. She's looking at us like we're a line item that doesn't belong on a spreadsheet. Reason number 75. This woman could destroy us with a memo. Reason number 76. She looks like she has memos pre-written for every occasion. "Your Majesty," Margot said, inclining her head with practiced deference. Her voice was smooth, measured, the voice of a woman who had never raised it because she had never needed to. "I was informed you were visiting the veterinary district. I thought I might accompany you back to the palace. The Northern Ridge delegation arrives in 3 hours, and your wardrobe consultation has been moved to accommodate." Her gaze slid to Fern. It wasn't hostile, it was worse than hostile. It was appraising. The look of someone measuring a thing against a standard it could never meet. "You must be Dr. Wilder," Margot said pleasantly. "The animal doctor. I've heard about the situation with the king's pet. How kind of you to accommodate. Perhaps we could arrange a more appropriate introduction at a later date, through the proper channels." The words were perfectly polite. The meaning was perfectly clear. You do not belong here. Go back to your animals and let the adults manage the kingdom. Fern's wolf bristled. It was still small. It was still anxious. But something about being bureaucratically dismissed in her own clinic made it sit up a little straighter. "Technically," it said, with a flicker of something that might have been pride, "we have a doctorate, and proper channels are what you use for plumbing complaints, not people." "The animal doctor," Fern repeated, her voice dangerously pleasant. "That's a charming way to put it, Lady Proteus. And I appreciate the offer, but I think the king is perfectly capable of deciding where he'd like to spend his morning without a scheduling consultation." Margot's smile didn't waver. It didn't need to. Her eyes did all the work. "Of course," she said smoothly. "The king's time is, naturally, his own. I merely serve to ensure that his public engagements reflect the dignity of the crown." She turned to Marcus. "Shall we, Your Majesty? The delegation won't wait." Marcus looked at Margot with the particular expression of a man who has spent years being managed and has only just realized he's tired of it. His eyes met Fern's over Margot's shoulder. There was an apology in them, but also a challenge, a silent question. "Are you in?" Fern thought of her quiet life, her popcorn, her reptile documentaries. She thought of the chaos, the gossip, the terrifyingly competent protocol officer currently trying to schedule her out of existence. Then she thought of the warmth of Marcus's hand, the surprising humor in his eyes, and the sheer, magnificent audacity of a dog who had decided to play matchmaker. Her wolf, trembling but determined, spoke up. "Reason number 1, we should say yes. He picked us. Reason number 2, technically we picked him back when we scratched Brutus's belly that first time. Reason number 3, we are tired of being small and safe and alone." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Marcus's entire posture relaxed. A slow smile, a real one this time, touched his lips. "Actually, Margot," he said, his voice ringing with the easy authority he'd misplaced for weeks. "The delegation can wait. Push the wardrobe consultation to tomorrow. Dr. Wilder and I are making plans for dinner." Something shifted behind Margot's eyes. A flicker of calculation, a rapid reassessment. She was not a woman who showed surprise, but Fern could see the gears turning, the implications, the logistics, the damage control that was already writing itself in her mind. "Of course, Your Majesty," Margot said, her voice betraying nothing. She inclined her head. "I'll adjust the schedule accordingly." She turned to Fern. "Dr. Wilder, a pleasure." It was not a pleasure. It was a warning wrapped in pleasantries, a silk glove over an iron fist. But Margot left as she had arrived, smoothly, precisely, and without a single hair out of place. The door clicked shut. Marcus sighed. "I apologize for that." "Don't be," Fern said, a grin spreading across her face. "That was the most exciting thing that's happened here since a parrot learned how to mimic the fire alarm. She's not going to let this go, is she?" "Margot Proteus has never let anything go in her life," Marcus said, and for the first time, he sounded almost impressed by it. "She once sent a formal complaint to the moon goddess's temple because the lunar eclipse ran 4 minutes over schedule and disrupted a state banquet." Fern laughed. "So, dinner. Where are we going?" She was in. She was definitely in. Her wolf, shaky but grinning in its own wolfish way, agreed. "We are in. We are going to need new scrubs for this. Do they make formal scrubs? Somebody must make formal scrubs." And for the first time, the thought of pack politics didn't fill her with dread. It filled her with a strange, exhilarating sense of anticipation. Their first date was a masterclass in comedic disaster. Marcus, in a grand gesture befitting a king, had a private table set up in the palace's moonlit conservatory. It was breathtakingly romantic, with glowing lunar flora, the gentle sound of a crystalline fountain, and 1,000 tiny star-like flowers woven into the glass ceiling. It was also, as Fern quickly discovered, directly adjacent to the royal aviary. Her wolf took one look at the setting and panicked. "This is beautiful. Too beautiful." Reason number 77. Environments this perfect are always a trap. Something terrible is about to happen. We can feel it. In our small wolf bones. It was right. Halfway through Marcus's earnest attempt to explain the nuances of a trade agreement with the Northern Ridge Pack, a particularly territorial cockatoo named General Fluffenstuff decided it despised the Alpha King with the fire of 1,000 suns. It began screeching a series of insults it had clearly learned from a disgruntled stable hand. "Thieving scoundrel! Grain thief!" the bird shrieked, rattling the bars of its enclosure. Marcus winced, trying to speak over the feathered onslaught. "As I was saying, the tariffs on enchanted lumber are—" "Pompous peacock! Bad hair!" screamed the cockatoo. Her wolf was delighted. "The bird is insulting the Alpha King! The bird! A creature with a brain the size of a walnut is publicly roasting the most powerful man on the continent. Reason number 78 we might survive this. If a bird isn't afraid of him, maybe we don't need to be either." Fern choked on her water, trying desperately not to laugh. "Is he always this opinionated?" "Only when he feels my authority is being challenged," Marcus muttered, glaring at the bird. His wolf was deeply offended. "An inferior feathered creature dares insult the Alpha? I will eat him." Marcus had to mentally restrain his inner wolf from demanding they storm the aviary. The rest of the dinner continued in a similar vein. A server, starstruck and nervous, tripped and sent a tray of dessert tarts flying, one of which landed perfectly on Marcus's head like a fruity beret. Fern, instead of being horrified, had calmly picked it off, popped it into her mouth, and declared it delicious. A move that made Marcus stare at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. He was used to people who were terrified of him, who deferred and scraped and bowed. He was not used to a woman who would eat a tart off his head and then critique the flakiness of the crust. It was, he decided, the most attractive thing he had ever seen. Her wolf, watching through Fern's eyes, was undergoing a slow transformation. He's got pastry in his hair. The Alpha King has pastry in his hair, and he's smiling about it. Okay, maybe he's not a mountain. Maybe he's just a very tall hill with good hair when it's not full of tart. Their conversations, in between interruptions, were surprisingly easy. Fern talked about her work, her passion for creatures big and small, her frustration with owners who thought dressing a lizard in a tiny sweater was a substitute for a proper heat lamp. Marcus, in turn, spoke of the immense pressure of his role, the loneliness of the throne. He dropped the regal facade, and she saw the man beneath, intelligent, burdened, and possessing a dry wit he rarely got to use. "You know," she said, swirling the last of her water in her glass, "for a guy with a reputation for being brooding and terrifying, you're actually kind of a dork." He blinked. "A dork?" "A lovable dork," she amended quickly. "The whole Alpha King thing is just branding, isn't it? Underneath it all, you're the guy whose dog has to set him up on dates and who gets bullied by a cockatoo." Instead of being offended, Marcus laughed. It was a real, deep laugh that seemed to surprise even him. "My reputation is in tatters, isn't it?" "Completely," she confirmed cheerfully. "And it's much better this way." As he walked her back to her small apartment above the clinic, a comfortable silence fell between them. The chaotic energy of the date had settled into something warm and gentle. At her door, he hesitated. "Despite the avian heckling and the dessert mishap, I had a very nice time, Fern." "Me too, Marcus," she said softly. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The gesture was tentative, but it sent a cascade of warmth through her. His eyes were dark and serious in the moonlight. Her wolf held perfectly still. "He's touching our hair. His hand is very gentle for something that could break a table in half. We might actually like this person. This is not a drill. This is worse than a drill. This is feelings." "I would like to do this again," he said, hopefully with fewer projectiles. "I'd like that," she whispered. He leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. Her breath caught in her throat. His gaze dropped to her lips. The world seemed to narrow to the few inches between them. And then, from the alleyway beside her building, came a loud metallic crash, followed by a string of curses. They sprang apart like startled cats. Mrs. Higgins from apartment 3B stuck her head out her window. "Is that you, Fern? Did you forget to put the lid on the recycling bin again? The raccoons are having a party in there." Her wolf groaned. The raccoons. The raccoons. They ruined it. They ruined our moment. Reason number 79 to move to a remote island. Raccoons do not respect romantic timing. The moment was shattered. Marcus let out a sigh that was a mixture of frustration and amusement. The universe seems determined to keep us on our toes. "Or it just really wants me to be better about recycling," Fern said, her face flushed. He smiled, a slow, heart-melting smile. "Good night, Fern." "Good night, Marcus." She watched him walk away, the powerful Alpha King who had been thwarted by a bird, a tart, and a gang of unruly raccoons. She stepped inside her apartment, leaned against the door, and slid to the floor, a giddy, disbelieving laugh bubbling up from her chest. Her wolf slid down with her. "We like him," it admitted quietly, as if confessing a crime. "We like the big, dorky Alpha King. Reason number 80 we're in trouble? He was going to kiss us, and we wanted him to. Reason number 81? We're already counting the hours until we see him again. Reason number 82? It paused. Actually, we don't have a reason number 82. We're just happy. And that's terrifying. This was insane. It was chaotic and messy and utterly, wonderfully ridiculous. And she wouldn't have it any other way. The Courtship of Fern Wilder by King Marcus Wolfhart became the stuff of pack legend, a story whispered over mugs of ale in taverns and gossiped about by ladies-in-waiting over their embroidery. It was a courtship marked not by grand poetic gestures, but by a series of escalating, well-intentioned fiascos. Marcus tried to be the romantic alpha of legend. He really did. He'd read the ancient texts, the epic poems about wolves and devotion. The problem was, reality refused to cooperate. He attempted to serenade her from the street below her apartment, a classic move. He had a beautiful voice, deep and resonant. Unfortunately, he started just as the baker across the street was receiving his morning flour delivery. A misplaced sack and a sudden gust of wind resulted in the Alpha King being coated head to toe in a fine white powder, looking less like a romantic hero and more like a very surprised ghost. Fern had leaned out her window, covered her mouth to hide her laughter, and shouted, "Nice try! 10 points for effort, minus several for the cloud of dust." Her wolf had been watching from behind Fern's eyes with a mixture of horror and adoration. "He looks like a powdered donut. The king looks like a powdered donut." Reason number 83. We are falling for a man who gets defeated by baking ingredients. Reason number 84. We don't even care. He's our powdered donut. Another time, he decided to impress her with his alpha strength. While on a walk in the royal woods, they came across a fallen log blocking their path. Instead of simply walking around it, Marcus decided to move it. He rolled up his sleeves, flexed, and with a mighty heave lifted the heavy log. He was a picture of raw power and masculine grace, until a family of squirrels, who had been living in the log, came pouring out in a panic, chittering indignantly. One, bolder than the rest, ran up his leg, onto his shoulder, and sat on his head, where it proceeded to scold him loudly before scampering up a tree. Fern had to sit down on the now displaced log. She was laughing so hard. "You have a real gift for antagonizing small furry creatures, Your Majesty." His wolf was mortified. "We were magnificent, powerful, and we were defeated by a nut hoarder. The shame." Fern's wolf, however, had watched the whole thing with wide-eyed wonder. "He's so strong. Did you see him lift that? With his arms? Those arms? And then the squirrel just sat on his head. And he let it. He let it." Reason number 85. He could have swatted it. He didn't. He just stood there looking confused and handsome. Reason number 86. We are completely, catastrophically gone for this man. But through it all, they talked. Between the comedic mishaps, they built something real. They found they could speak to each other with a frankness neither had with anyone else. Fern became the only person who wasn't afraid to tell Marcus when his counsel was being ridiculous or when he was taking himself too seriously. Marcus, in turn, saw past Fern's sarcastic, prickly exterior to the deeply compassionate woman beneath, who cried over a stray she couldn't save, and who worked tirelessly for the creatures who had no voice. She'd called her father about it 2 weeks into the courtship. Professor Arthur Wilder, retired, was a man who measured excitement in increments of historical footnotes. She'd expected gentle concern, maybe a warning about the dangers of royal entanglements. Instead, he'd said, "A king, Fern? How delightful. Does he know about the Wolfheart dynasty's role in the Third Territorial Accord? I have questions, several. Bring him to dinner. I'll make my lentil soup." Her father was going to be a problem. A lovely, enthusiastic, history-obsessed problem. Meanwhile, Lady Margot Procius was not taking the situation well. She didn't scheme the way a jealous rival would. There was nothing personal about her opposition. To Margot, Fern was a public relations crisis with a ponytail. An Omega veterinarian marrying the Alpha King was, in Margot's precise estimation, a branding catastrophe. Every press mention, every tavern whisper, every raised eyebrow at a state function was a crack in the edifice she had spent decades building. She didn't hate Fern, she simply considered her existence inconvenient. Her methods were not dramatic, they were administrative. She rescheduled Marcus's evenings so his free time evaporated. She arranged for visiting dignitaries to require his personal attention during every window Fern might have been available. She sent the royal tailor to measure Fern for a gown, and when the measurements came back, she'd sighed audibly and said, "Well, we'll do our best with what we have." She also tried to send Fern a bouquet of lunar nightshade, a flower beautiful to humans but mildly toxic to shifters, causing intense itchiness. It was framed as a welcoming gesture from the palace. The delivery boy, however, got the address wrong and delivered it to Lena at the herb shop next door. Lena, an expert in all things botanical, immediately recognized the plant, neutralized its effects with a simple poultice, and re-gifted the bouquet to Margot with a cheerful note that read, "Thanks for the thought. Returned in case you needed it for your own personal use. Best, Lena." Margot was seen scratching discreetly at the back of her neck for 3 days. Her most ambitious plan involved the annual Pack Unity Gala, a stuffy, formal affair. She arranged for a minor noble to accidentally spill a glass of dark red wine on Fern's dress during the opening reception. The noble in question, a nervous young woman named Helena who owed Margot several favors, had been given explicit instructions on timing, angle, and proximity. At the gala, Fern felt deeply out of place. The ballroom was a sea of jewels and silk, filled with powerful alphas and their perfectly coiffed partners. Her wolf was in full crisis mode. Everyone is beautiful. Everyone is tall. Everyone smells like they bathe in liquid gold. Reason number 87. We smell like antiseptic and the iguana we treated this afternoon. Reason number 88. That woman's necklace costs more than our entire clinic. Reason number 89. We should not have come. We should be at home, with our documentary, and our microwave popcorn, and our dignity. She stood beside Marcus, who looked impossibly handsome in his formal regalia. He squeezed her hand. "You look beautiful," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "I feel like a science experiment," she whispered back. "A study on what happens when you introduce a common field mouse into a den of lions." "You're not a mouse," he said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "And I'm the biggest lion in the den. No one will bother you." Across the ballroom, Helena began to make her way toward them, a glass of crimson wine held in her slightly trembling hand. She moved like someone walking toward a dentist appointment, determined, but clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Lena, standing nearby with Kale, Marcus's long-suffering beta, saw her coming. "Showtime," Lena muttered to Kale. 10 gold pieces says whoever Margot sent trips over their own guilt. "You're on," Kale whispered back, a rare smile touching his lips. Helena reached them, her face a mask of rehearsed nonchalance. "Dr. Wilder, what a lovely dress! Is that— Oh, I'm so clumsy," she began, positioning herself for the spill. But before she could complete the maneuver, a small page boy, chasing a loose palace corgi, darted between them. Helena, startled, stumbled backward. Her arm flew up and the entire glass of red wine arced through the air, not onto Fern's dress, but directly onto the pristine white cravat of Lord Valerius, the ancient, notoriously grumpy head of the Elder Council. The entire ballroom went silent. Lord Valerius looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest as if he'd been shot. He slowly raised his eyes to meet Helena's horrified ones. "Young lady," he said, his voice like gravel grinding together. "This cravat was woven from the silk of moon spiders. It is irreplaceable." Helena looked like she was about to faint. Across the ballroom, Margot Proteus stood perfectly still, her face betraying nothing. But Fern saw it, the tiniest twitch at the corner of her eye. The look of a general watching a battle plan collapse in real time. Kale discreetly passed 10 gold pieces to a grinning Lena. Fern's wolf was experiencing an emotion it had never felt before. Smug satisfaction. The plan failed. Their own plan failed on them. We didn't even have to do anything. Reason number 90 for staying: karma is real and she wears a wine-stained cravat. In the stunned silence, Marcus leaned close to Fern's ear. "I think," he whispered, a tremor of suppressed laughter in his voice, "this might be a good time for that vulnerability moment you're always talking about in those human psychology books you read." Fern looked at him, at the genuine amusement and affection in his eyes. He wasn't embarrassed by the chaos. He was reveling in it, with her. The noise of the ballroom faded away. It was just the two of them, an island of sanity in a sea of absurdity. "My place is a mess," she confessed in a low voice, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I'm not elegant or political. My idea of a formal event is wearing scrubs that don't have mysterious stains on them. I don't know how to be the partner of a king." The humor in his eyes softened into something deep and sincere. "Fern," he said, his voice dropping the royal cadence completely. "I spend my entire life surrounded by elegance and politics. It's exhausting. You're like a breath of fresh air. You're real. I don't want a perfect political partner. I want the woman who laughs when a squirrel yells at me. I want the woman who isn't afraid to tell me I'm being a dork." He took both of her hands in his. "I don't want you to learn how to be the partner of a king. I want to learn how to be the man who is worthy of you." It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. There were no violins, no moonlight. Just the two of them, standing in the middle of a scandalized ballroom, while the most powerful elder in the kingdom dripped wine onto the floor. Her wolf, for the first time, wasn't listing reasons. It wasn't panicking. It wasn't running numbers or narrating disaster. It was just still. Perfectly, completely still. Listening. And then, very quietly, "He means it. He actually means it. Nobody has ever. We've never." It couldn't finish the thought. It didn't need to. "Okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Okay, Marcus." For the first time, she didn't feel like a small Omega vet in a king's world. She felt like she was home. The aftermath of the Great Wine Incident, as it was now known, was swift and decisive. Lord Valerius, a man who held grudges longer than ancient trees held rings, ensured that Helena was excused from court duties for the season. The investigation into who had put her up to it lasted approximately one afternoon, before every finger pointed at the Office of Royal Protocol. Margot Protius, to her credit, did not deny it. She simply submitted a formal request to be reassigned to managing the Northern Ridge trade delegation, where my skills may be of better use. Marcus signed the transfer without comment. Margot packed her leather folios, adjusted her silver brooch, and left the palace with the same immaculate composure with which she had entered it. She would go on to be spectacularly effective at managing the Northern Ridge, who found her terrifying in a way they respected enormously. The gossip network exploded with the story, painting Fern not as a victim, but as some sort of karmic mastermind who could defeat her enemies without lifting a finger. She was, to her own bewilderment, becoming a folk hero. Marcus told her about the political fallout. One evening over takeaway noodles in her clinic after hours. The Elder Council had questioned his choice. Not publicly, they weren't stupid, but in the careful, coded language of old wolves who thought they knew better. They said an Omega vet wasn't strategic, Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. Strategic, Fern repeated flatly. As in, I don't come with a military alliance and a dowry of enchanted timber? Something like that. What did you say? Marcus took a long sip of his noodle broth, his eyes glinting. I told them that the last strategic approach they endorsed was masterminded by a woman who just got reassigned for weaponizing a wine glass, and that if they had further opinions about my personal life, they were welcome to take them up with Brutus, who would be happy to sit on their office floors for 3 weeks. Fern laughed until she choked on a noodle. Her wolf preened. He shut them down. The big alpha shut down his entire council. For us. Reason number 91, we are keeping this man. He weaponized Brutus as a political threat. That is the most romantic thing we have ever heard. But none of the politics mattered as much as the quiet shift that had occurred between her and Marcus. The games were over. The uncertainty was gone. What was left was something solid and real, a foundation built on laughter and a shared appreciation for the absurd. One evening, a week after the gala, Marcus appeared at her clinic just as she was closing up. He wasn't wearing his royal finery or his formal suits. He was in simple, comfortable clothes, worn jeans and a soft linen shirt that made him look younger, more approachable. He was holding a small, lumpy paper bag. I brought you something, he said, a nervous energy about him that she hadn't seen since the first days of the Brutus siege. It's not tarts, is it? she asked, wiping down her examination table. I'm still finding raspberry seeds in my hair. No, not tarts. He reached into the bag and pulled out 2 slightly misshapen apples. I picked them myself, from the oldest tree in the royal orchard, the one Brutus likes to nap under. It was a simple gesture, but it was so earnest, so endearingly awkward, that it made her heart ache. This was him, not the king, but Marcus, the man who was bullied by birds and who thought picking apples was a romantic gesture. Her wolf melted. He picked us apples, from a tree, with his hands, the same hands that sign treaties and command armies. He used them to pick fruit. For us. We are not going to cry. We are not going to cry. We are a wolf. Wolves don't. Okay, we're crying a little bit. Internally. Small, dignified wolf tears. They're perfect, she said softly, taking one from him. Their fingers brushed, and the familiar spark danced between them. Come on, she said, grabbing her keys. Let's go eat them somewhere that isn't filled with the ghosts of 1,000 animal ailments. They walked to the small park in the center of town, settling on a bench under a large oak tree as dusk painted the sky in shades of lavender and rose. For a while, they ate their apples in a comfortable silence, the only sound the crisp crunch of the fruit and the distant chatter of the town winding down for the night. Fern, Marcus said finally, turning to face her. His expression was serious, his gaze intense. There's something I need to ask you. Her heart started to beat a little faster. Her wolf went on high alert. Something important is happening. We can feel it. The air is different. He's looking at us the way he looked at us on the love seat. But more. Much more. When my father was king, he began, his voice low and steady, he told me that the right partner isn't the person who completes you. They're the person who makes you want to be a better version of yourself. He said you can't wait for the moon to decide for you. You have to choose. He looked down at the apple core in his hand, then back at her. For my entire life, I've been the Alpha King. It was a role I played, a mask I wore. It was lonely, and it was heavy. Then I met you. And you didn't see the king. You saw me. The dork who gets food in his hair. The man whose dog is smarter than he is. And you didn't run away. You laughed. He took a deep breath, and she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the raw, unfiltered emotion he so rarely showed the world. You make me a better version of myself, Fern. Not because you're forcing me to change, but because when I'm with you, I don't want to be the Alpha King. I just want to be Marcus, the man who is lucky enough to make you laugh. He shifted on the bench, getting down on one knee in the soft grass. Her wolf went silent. Not quiet, not subdued, silent. For the first time since Fern could remember, there was no running commentary, no numbered reasons, no catastrophic predictions, no lists, no panic, no anxious narration. Just stillness. As if her wolf, her small, anxious, beautiful wolf, had finally found the one thing in the world that didn't scare her. He wasn't holding a velvet box. He wasn't holding a priceless jewel. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, braided ring. It wasn't made of gold or silver, but of 3 strands woven together. A strand of his own dark hair, a strand of Brutus's coarse, tawny fur, and woven through it all, a single, shimmering thread of silver pulled from the selenite crystals in the moon goddess's grotto. It was a symbol of them, him, his ridiculous, scheming dog, and the quiet magic that had brought them all together. Fern Wilder, he said, his voice thick with a feeling so profound it made her own eyes well up. You are the most stubborn, sarcastic, compassionate, and wonderful woman I have ever known. You have turned my perfectly ordered life into a beautiful, chaotic mess, and I cannot imagine a single day without you in it. My wolf chose you. My dog chose you first, which he will never let me forget. And now, my heart chooses you. Will you marry me? Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling, a wide, watery, joyful smile. She thought of her quiet, lonely life before, her careful rules designed to keep everyone at a distance. Marcus hadn't just broken her rules, he had shown her how pointless they were. "Yes," she whispered, the word a happy sob. "Of course, yes." He slid the unique, perfect ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. He stood up and pulled her into his arms, and this time, when he leaned down to kiss her, there were no interruptions, no cockatoos, no raccoons, no scheming protocol officers. It was just them, under the stars, sealing a promise that had started with a thorn and had blossomed into something neither of them had expected. And deep inside her, her wolf finally spoke. One line, quiet, without a list, without a number, without a reason. "Oh, this is what safe feels like." A single happy bark echoed from the edge of the park. They broke apart to see Brutus sitting there, his tail thumping a steady, approving rhythm against the ground. He had, of course, been watching the whole time. He let out another bark, as if to say, "Finally, now let's go home." The royal wedding of King Marcus Wolfheart and Fern Wilder was, by all accounts, the most chaotic and beloved event in the kingdom's history. Fern had put her foot down on most of the stuffy, traditional elements. "No 1,000-guest list," she'd declared. "I don't want to pledge my life to you in front of a bunch of people I've never met. It's a wedding, not a tax audit." They settled on a small, intimate ceremony in the same moonlit conservatory where they'd had their disastrous first date. General Fluffenstuff, the cockatoo, had been temporarily relocated to a soundproof chamber 3 wings away, a decision Marcus called a vital matter of national security. Lena was, of course, the maid of honor. She had designed Fern's dress, a simple, elegant gown of pale green silk that shimmered like new spring leaves. Cale stood as Marcus's best man, his usual weary expression replaced by one of genuine, if slightly bewildered, happiness. The biggest point of contention had been the ring-bearer. The royal council had insisted on a young noble page. Fern had insisted on Brutus. "He started this whole thing," she argued, hands on her hips. "He orchestrated our entire relationship. He's not just the ring-bearer, he's the executive producer. He deserves to be there. End of discussion." And so, on the day of the wedding, as the music began to play, a hush fell over the small gathering. Then, a wave of stifled giggles rippled through the conservatory. Brutus padded down the aisle with solemn dignity. Tied around his neck with a silken ribbon was a small velvet pillow, on which rested the 2 simple wedding bands. He walked with the unhurried confidence of a creature who knew this was his masterpiece, the grand finale of his intricate plan. He reached the altar, sat neatly at Marcus's feet, and let out a soft woof, as if to say, "Proceed." Fern, walking down the aisle on the arm of her father, Professor Arthur Wilder, felt a fresh wave of love for the ridiculous, wonderful life she had stumbled into. Her father was beaming with the particular delight of a man who had spent the morning cornering Cale with detailed questions about pre-shifter dynastic lineages and was now living his absolute best life. Her wolf was quiet, the good kind of quiet, the kind that had settled over her since the night in the park. Not anxious silence, but peace. We're walking toward him. He's standing there, waiting for us. He chose us, and we are choosing him. That's all the reasons we need. She reached Marcus, who took her hands in his. His eyes were shining. "You were right," he murmured, so only she could hear. "He's the executive producer." "And don't you forget it," she whispered back. The ceremony was beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises not of fairy tale perfection, but of honest, messy, everyday love. They promised to always make each other laugh, to face the chaos together, and to never, ever let a squirrel win an argument. When the elder, a far more cheerful one than Lord Valerius, pronounced them partners for life, Marcus didn't wait. He swept Fern into his arms and kissed her with a joy that left the guests cheering. Brutus, sensing the culmination of his efforts, let out a single, triumphant bark that echoed through the glass dome. A deep, booming, full-chested sound that made the starflowers on the ceiling tremble. Fern's wolf, the small one, the anxious one, the one who had spent its whole life counting reasons to be afraid, that wolf lifted its head and howled. It was a small sound, as howls go, not the kind that shook mountains or announced kings. But it was clear, and it was certain, and it was full of something it had never quite managed before: courage. The reception that followed was less of a royal ball and more of a family party. There was music and dancing, but there was also Cale, cornered by Fern's father for a continued discussion on pre-shifter dynastic lineages that had now entered its third hour. Lena was teaching a group of stoic royal guards a boisterous folk dance from her village, and in the center of it all were Marcus and Fern, dancing their first dance as a married couple. "Happy?" he whispered into her hair. "Deliriously," she answered, her head resting on his chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the low, contented rumble of his wolf. Who knew a thorn in a paw could lead to all this? "A very, very smart dog knew," Marcus chuckled. He pulled back, his expression turning serious for a moment. "Thank you, Fern." "For what? For marrying you?" "For seeing me. For showing me that a king can also be a dork, and that love doesn't have to be a grand epic poem. Sometimes it's just picking apples and laughing until you cry." Later that evening, as the reception wound down, they slipped out onto the conservatory's wide stone balcony. The moon hung full and heavy over the kingdom, painting everything in silver. The sounds of the party drifted behind them: laughter, music, the muffled protests of Cale trying to escape Professor Wilder's lecture on territorial borders circa 1743. Brutus appeared beside them, as he always did, and settled at their feet with a contented sigh. Marcus leaned against the stone railing. Fern leaned against Marcus. The three of them stood there in the moonlight, a king, a vet, and the dog who had made it all happen. Fern's wolf spoke up, one last time. Not with a list, not with a reason, just a quiet, warm thought that settled over her like a blanket. "This is our pack now. It's small, and it's a little bit ridiculous. And the big one's wolf still scares us sometimes. But it's ours, and we are never letting go." "I'm going to have to add a fourth rule to my list," Fern said softly, her eyes twinkling in the moonlight. He raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Rule 4, she said. Always listen to the dog. He knows what he's doing." Marcus laughed, the sound warm and full in the quiet night. He kissed the top of her head, and she closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and ozone and home. And on the stone beneath them, Brutus's tail gave a single, sleepy thump. A final, contented punctuation mark on a love story he had written himself. The kingdom, they would later find, ran much more smoothly with a queen who wasn't afraid to tell the elder council they were behaving like a bunch of grumpy badgers, and a king who remembered to laugh. Their life was never perfectly orderly, and it was certainly never quiet, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the occasional well-intentioned disaster. It was, in short, perfect.